Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Guardian Radio AM. My name is K. Quincy Parker. It is my pleasure to chat with you this morning. I wish that we could talk about that we could be talking about something pleasant, but today we have to talk about that thing which has gripped the entire world, and that is the war that Russian President Vladimir Putin is prosecuting against the independent state of Ukraine. Now, of course, Putin has long been accepted as an outlier among world leaders, and he's there are those who have views about what his end game may be, and we'll get into some of that over the course of the next hour. But what we want to focus on really is to start to try and get an understanding of what this conflict will mean for us here in the Bahamas, for our region, and for our hemisphere. You know, this war is on the other side of the world, but the truth is that the annual average of 19% of all imports to the 15 members of the Caribbean community that consist of food and agricultural goods, that's about $5 billion per year, billion with a B. That's typically covered by our foreign reserves generated by tourism. So security is deeply threatened in this region by any major disruption that impacts the region. So I want to point out again, in the context of what we're going to be talking about today, this war that Russia is prosecuting against Ukraine, we are, as a CARICOM, Caribbean community, we import 19%, all 19% of our imports every year, it's about $5 billion, are food and agricultural goods. We usually pay for that with our tourism receipts, but supply chain, COVID-19, and other disruptions in the way our economies have been working in the last 2 years have presented a number of difficulties. And so the fallout from this war is going to be even more pronounced than it might otherwise have been. So a little history in terms of what is happening. So Russia has launched a devastating attack on the Ukraine, and Russian forces are bombing city centers and closing in on Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, which has led, of course, to a mass exodus of refugees. We're talking about 500,000 or so already fled the country. And the backdrop here is that for months, Vladimir Putin denied that he would invade the Ukraine, but then he tore up a peace deal on February 24th, really, and unleashed what Germany is calling Putin's war, pouring forces into Ukraine's north, east, and south. Basically, the rest of Europe has united in accusing Putin of shattering peace in Europe. And what happens next obviously could jeopardize Europe's entire security structure. The UN has waded into it, as has the United States, and we'll get to all of their responses a little later. But I listened to an interview this morning from a Ukrainian member of parliament who has said that over the last 24 hours, she witnessed increased bombing of at least 2 Ukrainian cities, and said that the Russian Air Force had attacked a Ukrainian television tower in order to disrupt TV signals. They'd sent missiles into the Jewish quarter of the city. They destroyed half of the second biggest city in the country. I think the population of Kiev is something along the lines of 1.5 million. And they are attempting to lay siege to Kiev, the capital. By way of context for those of us who like this sort of thing, Ukraine is a democracy with 44 million people. And we'll talk a little bit about their president in a little while. The story is kind of similar to Sweet Mickey, but back to this morning's interview with the Ukrainian member of parliament. And I want to quote something that she said. I pulled on the side of the road to write it down. What she said was, quote, "Every time you hear the word peace come from Putin's lips, you need to get your rifle and start marching forward, because this means he will be attacking you and everything that you love." Unquote. And so that's the state of at least that one Russian, that one Ukrainian who spoke to news reporters this morning from the Ukraine, where she is still participating in parliament meetings. Ukraine has declared martial law, and the world is watching and applauding Ukraine for managing to continue to hold on through this onslaught. Yeah. And then the United Nations is expected to seriously reprimand Russia today. It's going to isolate Russia at the UN. The sanctions have come swift and plentifully. Biden, U.S. President Joe Biden, has said that Putin is the one who wanted this war, and he's going to get what's coming, and that, quote unquote, he has no idea what's coming. The U.S. is among other nations that have closed their airspace to Russian aircrafts, and the Ukraine is receiving military aid from unlikely places like Sweden and other Nordic states. These countries generally don't sell or give military. They don't give weapons but they're doing it in this instance because everyone around the world, more or less, appears, particularly in Europe, appears to accept that the Russian aggression into the Ukraine is basically a threat to the rest of the world's democracies. Ukraine is working to get in, and they're considering joining NATO, and NATO is a huge deal. The Ukraine joining NATO, that would be a huge deal. A little more context before we get into dealing specifically with our country and region. The Russian forces I just want everyone to understand what's going on, right? The Russian forces have reached an estimated strength of 190,000. And that's 200,000 practically, right? And it's the largest mobilization of forces Europe has seen since 1945. And I mean, Ukrainian soldiers and civil resistance fighters are battling to fend off the Russians, who are attacking, as I said, in the east, the north, and the south. And you have to remember what led up to this. In a TV address, and by now people who've kind of been following this may have seen a video of this TV address that Putin gave on February 20, declared that Russia could not feel safe, develop, and exist because of what he claimed was a constant threat from a modern Ukraine. And immediately as he said that, airports and military headquarters were attacked, and then tanks and troops rolled in from Russia. Russian annexed Crimea, which Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014, or at least the illegality of that annexation is what is claimed by other European states. And Russians' ally Belarus also was a staging ground for the attacks. But if you follow the news, Belarusian President Lukashenko has some issues, right? So that's what's happening. And warplanes are bombing major cities. So even though the Russian propaganda machine over time to say there have not been civilian attacks, and the footage, the reportage, the news from the ground tells the real story. We're talking about attacks by tanks, almost 200,000 troops, and warplanes bombing cities. And if I remember the number I saw earlier this morning, casualties are almost 15,000 so far, and it's insane. And so the question is why, right? What is it that Putin intends to get from this aggression? And before I see your text message, I just want to make sure that I announce that Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell is scheduled to call into the show here in the next few minutes, and we'll have a conversation with him how the war in Russia and Ukraine is going to affect the Bahamas. My research shows some very specific effects and effects that we will feel if we're not already feeling them, that we'll be feeling in the next weeks. I mean, it's inevitable. But I want to have that conversation with the good minister before we go into that. So as soon as Mr. Mitchell gives us a call, he's as you know, out of the country, but he'll be joining us here in a few minutes. This text message says, sorry, it's a long one. It says, I find it extremely odd that world leaders are praising the Ukrainian people's strength while we all watch them die. I don't say I have a solution, but I think somebody dropped the ball on Putin. It will be difficult to stop the 10-ton ball now, but someone's intelligence should have prevented the ball from starting. This comes after the debacle existing in Afghanistan. How many of these we never expected this can the world take? It's a very good question. I see you, Texter. absolutely. So, Kermit, I can't see you around the paper. So just give me some kind of signal when you. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I just said give me a signal because I can't see you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. So what does Putin want? Putin wants to quote unquote. This is what he says he wants to protect people subjected to bullying and genocide, and aim for the demilitarization and denazification of the Ukraine. This is what Putin says, that the Ukraine is a Nazi state, a militarized Nazi state, and that he's trying to protect Russia from the militarized Nazi state next door. After this call, we'll get back to some of this context. But I do see that call. So, caller, thank you for joining us on Guardian Radio AM this morning. How are you?
Godly day it is dark in the voice along Ukraine. We need justice and law in the whole world today, especially in the Bahamas. You know, I agree with that text. This is my main reason for calling. I will going to call you pertaining to that text. What talked about watching people die, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I said the same thing in my mind, and I was going to call you. Why all of those people that's in authority don't help? They're just watching the people die. That's insane. Another thing is, right, Quincy?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, a lot of people find it easy to establish war, what's happening pertaining to the war, right? But when it comes to the pandemic, everybody will flew away at the door. I don't appreciate that. Give me justice, man. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yes, sir. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call. And the caller has and the text before have a very, they make a point that is a compelling point. Why is it that that things have to escalate to this level before there is an intervention? And the truth of the matter is, I believe that when you're talking about a nuclear state, the last thing you want to do is aggravate somebody who has shown themselves to be as potentially unstable as Vladimir Putin. So I think that's probably why there have been so many people raising their voices, but not necessarily, quote unquote, putting the smack down. I think that's probably what's going on there. I see those calls coming in. The fact is, despite what no Slim, it's not a full-time gig yet. Despite what Putin has claimed, there has been no genocide in the Ukraine. It is a vibrant democracy of, as I say, about 44 million people. It's led by a president who used to be a comedian. That's no joke. And he's also Jewish. So what militarization? What Nazification? So Putin has frequently accused the Ukraine of being taken over by extremists ever since the pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych was ousted after months of protest against his rule. Russia retaliated by seizing the southern region of Crimea. Remember, we talked about them annexing Crimea in 2014. Well, this is why they did that, because the Russian people ousted Yanukovych, who was a pro-Russian president. So the history of this war is simple, but insane. Caller, thank you for joining us on Guardian Radio AM. What's up?
Hey, Quincy. Good morning. How are you, my brother?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Right here, man. Listen, the hypocrisy. It's very ironic that we have nations who talk about they don't want other nations to have nuclear weapons and so on and so forth. However, these are the same countries that do possess these things, and they don't want others to have them. So basically, then, when you look at it, is what is the difference between them? Right now, as we can see, we're saying the same thing. Vladimir Putin is actually demonstrating the exact thing that he says that he's speaking out against, and it is the atrocity of destroying other people's lives, murdering people, using weapons. I mean, how can you achieve the objective that you're talking about when you're doing the exact same thing that you're accusing others potentially of doing to you? And it's really kind of pathetic that certain countries can say that certain countries shouldn't have these weapons, but yet they possess them, and they basically potentially can use them against other countries that they seem or deem to want to overtake. So this is something I think the world must keep their eyes on and watch.
All right. Thank you very much, Chef. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All righty. Thank you, caller, for you are live with us here on Guardian Radio AM. How may I be of service? What do you have to say? Are you still with us? No, it doesn't sound like it. All right. So back to the text line. This texter says, what keeps peace to a large extent in this world is the respect and adherence to agreed international law and order. Otherwise, there would be wars upon wars anytime any country decides they want to dominate another country because they are stronger and have more weaponry. Russia is out of order, and Ukraine needs help. The world needs to assist these people. Well, okay, and the texter further says Putin wants the territory of Ukraine. It's a strategic move to strengthen their position military-wise. Well, texter, I think it actually goes deeper than that. And we'll get to that after I read these other text messages. Ukraine needs to send a few missiles over there to Russia to give Putin a taste of what it feels like. He is going to flatten the Ukraine anyway while the West looks on. Certainly that's how it may look at this moment, I'm sure. This one says Putin is trying to start a world war. World leaders have to be very careful on how to deal with this serious problem of Putin. This texter says, hi, good topic. Putin is afraid of NATO setting up in his backyard, just like the Americans were paranoid when Russia moved into Cuba at their back door. And I think, texter, that you have a very, very good point, particularly bringing up NATO. We're going to get to NATO in just a moment. This one says, come on, Quincy, let's be real. There are a few issues at hand here. The Donbass situation, the NATO situation. Putin has been voicing his concerns for years, and like it or not, if we were to allow China in here, what do you think America will do? Sit on their hands? The Monroe Doctrine would be in full effect, and Putin is no worse than present leaders before and past. I disagree with you, but thank you for sharing your views. This one says, good morning. Okay. This person says, good morning. So you guys didn't do your homework. Have you heard of Azov? It's the Nazi militant group that is part of the Ukraine army. As I say, we can get to that too. This one says, this is a follow-up text from earlier. Says, I'm not suggesting that anybody go to war. I'm saying he should have been dissuaded before he started. My question is on the intelligence machine or failure to act on intelligence. Somebody underestimated Putin big time. They made the exact same mistake in Afghanistan. At that time, they said we never expected Afghanistan to fall so quickly. How can intelligence fail consistently on two issues with such potential and now realize devastating impacts? Well, Texter, I don't think they failed. in terms of intelligence, because I don't think Putin was hiding his agenda at all. I think that there was a refusal to believe that he would go as far as he has gone. That's not a failure of intelligence. That's just he's crazy, but he's not that crazy, which is a failure of estimation of just how crazy this fella is. That's my view, of course. If the world helps, then this is a texter here. If the world helps, then we'll have World War III. They are helping by isolating Russia, sure, through space, airspace, and finances, etc. And texter, I think you hit on it. That is most likely the rationale behind the refusal, well, not refusal, but the choice that other countries have made thus far not to intervene in a military way. I mean, except, by supplying or attempting to supply the Ukraine with defensive artillery, defensive machinery, ways to defend their country. But it's clear now that Russia is seeking to seize the big cities and overthrow the Ukraine's democratically elected government. The president there is Volodymyr Zelensky. He's the Ukrainian president, and he said that he's been warned that the enemy has designated him as target number 1, and his family is target number 2. Russia's stated aim is that the Ukraine be freed from oppression and cleansed of the Nazis. But his long-term ambitions for the Ukraine are quote-unquote unknown. One observer quoted in the BBC says that he denies seeking to occupy Ukraine and rejected a UK accusation in January that he was plotting to install a pro-Kremlin puppet. One unconfirmed intelligence report says he aims to split the country in two. But the truth is, and I'm ending the BBC quote there. Caller, thank you for joining us. You are live on Guardian Radio AM.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Parker.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, that last text has, or the statement that you read now has some logic to it, right? Now, it either would be to segment Ukraine into, right, like you said, right, or to occupy it, right?
I'm sorry, caller. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, but the minister is out of the country and he's joined us now. Can I ask you to call back after he's done, please? All righty. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Minister Mitchell. Thank you very much for calling, and we appreciate your taking the time out to join with us today.
Is it afternoon over there already?
No, it isn't, That's just the life I live in.
Okay. All right. Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry about this. I just stepped out of the meeting.
Sure, no worries. So the question is, how do you think this war will affect the Bahamas? I mean, it's a simple sounding question, but it's a very complicated answer, I'm sure. Hello, you still there, sir?
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're coming in and out. Were you able to hear my question?
No. It started to say something about how do I think the war was. What about the war?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So my question is, how do you think the war that Russia is prosecuting against the Ukraine will affect the Bahamas?
Well, the problem for us is that we have, as the number one contributor to our GDP, the tourism sector. And this is a highly sensitive sector to any dislocations in the world. So when you have war or threats of war, people start getting afraid to leave their homes. And of course, tourism depends on people leaving their homes to come and be where we are. So it's, of course, cause of immediate concern. And then secondly, war tends to breed economic depression, collapse, sometimes inflation, so people start holding on to their money. And again, since tourism is a discretionary spending, the net effect of it is people will be keeping money in their pockets and not traveling overseas. Of course, this comes hard on the heels of the pandemic, which we're just trying to defeat at the moment. And at the moment, we're just trying to get back upon our feet after 2 years of recession.
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say, or do you think the effects will be more widespread than limited just to the tourism sector?
Well, I started with tourism because that's the bread and butter of the country, and so if that's affected, then everything is affected. I mean, you just had 2 years when there were no U.S. dollars on the streets in New Providence and the rest of the country. Spending was depressed, and people themselves were depressed because there was no money. Right now, for example, down here at the CARICOM conference, the Caribbean Hotel Association, the Caribbean Tourism Organization are all being advised by the private sector in the region that we have to scrap all of these restrictions on travel to our country because we are now putting ourselves in a competitive disadvantage to our competitors. So we have all these restrictions. The Dominican Republic has scrapped all their restrictions. Mexico has scrapped all their restrictions. And so their gain or our losses are the two destinations. So the commercial sector in our region is saying, look, heads of government have to make the hard decision that we have to live with this virus and scrap all these restrictions. Otherwise, we're going to lose our shirts economically. And this is a highly persuasive argument. Not sure which direction it will go in, but I see where Jamaica has already announced that it has scrapped everything except the requirement for a test 72 hours before you travel there. And that really should be, I guess, across the board the position.
Wow. So the reason that I ask the follow-up question is, of course, because Russia and the Ukraine are, I think, between the two of them, they are responsible for a third of the world's wheat exports. And of course, you know that's going to affect the price of things like flour, which is going to have an effect on the cost of food. So there's also the food security question as well, eh?
They're starting with tourism because all the inputs into tourism, of course, will be affected. You know that the Bahamas imports virtually 99% of its food inputs and other inputs to everything that we do. So whatever the price increases take place will have a knock-on effect throughout the sector, which is why this whole action in Eastern Europe is just inexplicable. The interruption to world commerce. These sanctions that they're imposing, against the rulers of these countries who are engaged in this adventurism in Ukraine. All of this is just leading to dislocations throughout the whole economic system of the world. Oil prices, for example, are going sky high, and that also is going to affect us. I think the press quoted me a couple of days ago as saying that some people were predicting there'd be an $8 a gallon price for gas. Our socks off because this is hugely expensive, and you just don't know where it's all going to end. Mm-hmm. So it is in the best interest of the world actually for this to stop. And but the fellow who's in charge in Russia does not have any sympathetic air, and I was quite surprised because I just stepped out of a meeting where the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who's Ralph Gonzalez, has just written a very strong letter to President Putin. They are quite close friends with the Russian Federation. St. Vincent is. They also sit on the Security Council, and they quite frankly said that this is wrong and that you have to put an end to it because it is not in the best interest of the world, and it isn't. But he has a mistaken view of history. and a view that their security interests are threatened by what happened in Ukraine, and that's the reason he's taking the action. But of course, it's a bathwater.
And there is also the possibility that he's just throwing up a smokescreen because all he really wants to do is reconstitute the USSR. But that's yes, my view. You wouldn't. Yeah.
That's why I said he has a mistaken view of history.
Yeah.
The typical response of the Russians who support him and people who support him was, one is, I see a pushback going throughout the region that George Bush went into Iraq, Obama went into Libya, and essentially the American military machine ruined those countries, killed tens of thousands of people. And nobody from this region spoke up when those things happened. Well, that's not entirely correct. But people are saying, well, if the Americans did it and got away with it, then why can't Russia do it, since they are perceived that their security interests are threatened? Well, the first response to that, of course, is assuming that the Americans were wrong, or that the Americans were wrong in Libya or in Iraq. Two wrongs don't make a right in this situation. The principle is that the United Nations Charter that we signed on to says that there must be the inviolability of territorial lines. This has been so in Africa, where the colonial powers drew up lines without regard to the nation states that existed in Africa, causing many, many problems. But the African states have simply accepted that those are the lines, and everybody's trying to work within them. So similarly, the Russians are now trying to. Ukraine is not a real country, and it is. And those are the lines that behind which the country is drawn, and they should just remain. There is no reason to be inflicting this level of punishment, death, and destruction on the people in that country.
Yeah. It's the last question, Minister, is just because I know you're limited on time, but what can the Bahamas do in this situation? I mean, what effect can we have? How can we take either a stand or strike a blow to show our support for democracy, or what can we do? What can the Bahamas do?
Well, I think mainly inspired by some of these F&M trolls online, I've seen this sarcasm and cynicism by people trying to make me a kind of thing that Putin's going to come after me and all sorts of rubbish. Meaning that I assume the underlying argument is that the Bahamas is so small, why are we getting in those people's business? Well, the point is that, one day they come for the other person, the next day they come for you. And so you have to stand up for the principle. And what I say everywhere is, when your voice is all you have, you're supposed to use your voice. Even if your voice shakes, you're supposed to use your voice and say, I do not believe in that. I do not support it. And it's an analogous situation would be this. I mean, we go to funerals, for example, all the time. Why do we go? We can't bring back the dead, but we go there to show our support for the family, and it makes a difference to the family. So the people in Ukraine who are being punished unjustly want to know that there are other people who stand with them. And we know that when it comes our turn, there are people who stand with us. Just as, people, when the hurricane took place, people in the who are friends, who we do business with in South Florida, they didn't stand by and say, oh, well, what can we do? The place is all ruined. We're not going to go there anymore. They went into action, collected goods, and they brought goods to the Bahamas to help rebuild the place. And they expressed themselves and gave us moral support. So that's what we can do. And we should not allow the Russians to fall into error on this by being silent. And so that's the first step. Secondly, in the context of supporting our moral voice, of course, is to ensure that we support the CARICOM position on this. And I would say there's a practical issue, which is that, the Russians just spoke to me at the expo in Dubai. and they want to have their country showcased in 2030 as a place of modernity. They therefore are seeking to get the license from the Bureau of International Expositions in Paris to have an expo in Moscow in 2030. Well, they're saying that they're going to be coming to the Bahamas and they're going to be coming to the CARICOM countries over the next year or so, because the vote is in November of next year. Well, that's important to them. This is the point at which we have some leverage to say, look, you can't be conducting yourselves in this fashion and then come asking us to support you for this. Your country's not conducting itself within the usual international norms, and that's not something that we can support. Mm-hmm. So that's one sort of pressure point, if you will.
Yeah. So I mean, and it comes down to in the way that the world's architecture has been sort of modeled and created. Every country has a voice. And you use your voice if that's all you have, as you say.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. So within the meetings down here in Belize, there's a very spirited discussion about this. And it's difficult because, of course, all of us are joined at the hip to the United States. And it is difficult to have a conversation with your friends. I mean, the flashpoints in this region right now, for example, on Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela.
Venezuela, yeah.
You can't it appears that you can't have a rational conversation with U.S. any of these points. Cuba, for example, is a part of the hemisphere. And there's an upcoming meeting called the Summit of Americas, which takes place in the summertime. It's being hosted in the States by Los Angeles. And we understand that the United States has taken the position that Cuba, under no circumstances, will be invited to attend this meeting. But how so? I mean, they've been invited to the two previous meetings. CARICOM has stood up and said, look, Cuba is a nation, for good or ill, who's part of the hemisphere. You may disagree with them ideologically, but that is no reason why they can't sit at the table. We've voted, all of us, against the embargo. Similarly, we understand that they're going to be inviting a fellow named Guido, who claims to be who they recognize as the leader of Venezuela, when in fact he has no such standing. Mm-hmm. So, all of these, of course, are flashpoints, but because the U.S., they are our friends, it makes it difficult, I suppose, for some countries to have that conversation, and doubly so for us, because we're just 50 miles away, and perhaps more by them than any other country in the region. But if your principles are what they are, then you stand up for your principles, and I think that's important across the board. All these situations,
for sure,
difficult, but it's crucial for us to stick, I think, by principles.
And the CARICOM position, of course, so far on this war is bad Putin. Stop it.
Yes, there's a very strong statement which will come out in a couple of minutes about the situation in Ukraine. And I think it's not inconsistent with the position that was taken with regard to the U.S. and Iraq. It was just a misdeed, which should not have happened. Mm-hmm. But as I say, we had no, of course, material impact on any of these things. But the fact is, if the principle is correct, I think you have to stand up for the principle. And that's what's taking place here.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll let you go with that, sir. If you have any final thoughts about the situation, you're welcome. We'd love to hear them. But I'm done with my questions.
Yeah, I think that what interests me, I got a call from one of your colleagues, I guess. I think his show is on Fridays. And it just interests me, just watching from overseas, the response to Bahamians on all of these foreign affairs matters. I don't think anybody cares about foreign affairs except when they lose their passports. And it's just interesting to see that people are actually engaged in the commentary on this and realize that we, do have some say and certainly some stake in where all of this ends up. Because if there's war in the world, it's going to affect us. It is already affecting us on so many levels. And we just have to, in our view, the principles, support the principle because the principle is a good one for our own country and its territorial integrity. And to turn to things we can do. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a big campaign now for food security. There was a very long presentation by the president of Guyana yesterday on food security and what we can do to begin to feed ourselves, which has been an aspiration of all of our leaders from the time we all gained independence. So that's what's coming down the road. We've got to hunker down. This war is most unfortunate because we just had a report in our own country that the revenues are 60% up over where they were last year. That's a significant achievement. And as the tourism people are saying, we have the potential now, if we are able to get rid of these COVID restrictions, to do even better. I mean, I was looking, for example, at trying to back to Nassau on Sunday, and a seat, I think the 4:30 flight or the 12:30 flight on American Airlines one way to the Bahamas was $3,050 one way to Nassau, Miami, Nassau.
That's Caribbean dollars, though. Or is that's not U.S. dollars?
This is U.S. dollars. $3,050 one way from Miami to Nassau, a 30-minute flight. So the demand is clearly high. I don't know who would actually pay that, but that's what I saw online.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time, and we'll be looking forward to seeing that statement coming out of CARICOM. Appreciate you. Be safe.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye.
Bye bye. So that's the view, the advice, the position of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, as articulated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The first and probably the effect will come in our tourism sector. There are those of us who sometimes wish that everything was not about tourism, and we sometimes want to hear things other than tourism get first priority. But the reality is that that's just not our country as yet. And at the present moment, tourism is our bread and butter. And so anything that affects tourism is going to be the headline. And so food security, kind of comes second to tourism, really. And even the hike in oil prices, which will have an effect on the price that you pay for gas, and also the cost of goods, because the transportation costs are going to go up and the shipping costs are going to go up. So the world is in for a little bit of a price bump, or a lot of a price bump, but our position as the Bahamas is to in every arena that we have a voice or a vote to say no to this war, and recommend that Russia pull back. With the last 5 minutes, I'll read some of these text messages which have come in while the minister and I were chatting. Thank you all for your patience. Here we go. Hello, as a visiting American, it has been interesting to hear Bahamian perspectives. Thank you. America is in a difficult situation many times, like these condemnations. American intelligence is... What? Sorry. Many times like these, I think our military adventures have not been popular or very successful lately. So it's a fine line between what people will tolerate and what will draw broad condemnation. American intelligence is certainly aware of the threats, but the restraint in this case allowed Russia to make a miscalculation that will justify the extraordinary consequences they are now suffering. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, this person is refuting the idea that the Ukraine is a democracy, and has advised us to check it out. This person says, sorry, where is this? Oh. This one says it is okay. This texter is responding to my, I think my response to their text where they talked about the failure of intelligence, and I mean I certainly expressed the view that I'm not sure that it was a failure of intelligence. But the texter says in response, it is a failure of intelligence. Do you remember those documents leaked from the U.S. Embassy in Nassau? They had profiles written up on every politically exposed person, who the movers and shakers were, who had the real power, who should be taken seriously, etc. The fact that someone didn't take Putin seriously is a failure. Someone should have recognized something different. I like this last statement, Texter. The 2030 movies will tell us what went wrong. You're probably not wrong about that. This texter says, I don't get us and our visionless leaders. Seeing the challenges with oil and gas prices, why aren't our leaders moving full speed ahead with solar and electric cars? Instead, they are doubling down on this woe is us when gas prices reach $8 a gallon cry. I hear you, texter. This one says, stop what? This is all planning by the powers that be. Their plans are coming to fruition. None of this was a surprise. The world was stopped for COVID, brought on by the same powers. What's so different now? This last texter says, okay, good morning. The Russia and Putin's invasion of the Ukraine as West and we look on should teach us an overdue lesson in the Bahamas to be battle-ready, food security, and national pride. So then Pindling recommended a national youth service. They claim he wanted to form an army. But here it is, we seem to have lost a generation of men on drugs, alcohol, gambling, prison, and just wasting their lives away, when they could have been in a position to serve and represent and defend their country. Oh, all right, Kermit, I see you. I guess we don't have time to take that call. No. All right, and that texter is going to have the last word here on Guardian Radio AM for this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, and may God bless you, and we'll see you again next week or tomorrow. Who knows? Take care. Bye-bye.